Pablo Escobar. Raised in Medellin by a schoolteacher mom and farmer dad, Escobar ditched university and dove headfirst into petty crime during the 1960s. He started with stealing tombstones and forging fake diplomas, basically a resume built for prison. Then came the Marlboro cigarette smuggling scene and car theft. By 1976, he wasn't just messing around. He launched the Cartel and built trafficking routes from Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador straight into the United States. By the 1980s, his cartel was shipping somewhere between 70 and 80 metric tons of cocaine into the country every single month. That was over 90% of the entire supply. He was hauling in around $420 million every week. That's $22 billion a year. Forbes pegged his peak net worth around $30 billion, which in today's money would be close to $80 billion. He ran the operation like a full-on corporation. There were regional managers, transport fleets using planes, submarines, boats, even makeshift refining labs. His infamous estate, Hacienda Nápoles, came complete with a zoo full of elephants and hippos, a Formula One track, and statues of dinosaurs because apparently cocaine made him 6 years old again. His homes were absurd. One had walls stuffed with cash and a swimming pool so toxic it belonged in a horror movie. Escobar's favorite business motto was plata o plomo, silver or lead, bribe or die. That wasn't just talk. He bombed buildings, took down an entire commercial flight, and ordered the murders of thousands. Judges, politicians, cops, no one was off limits. After a 16-month hunt, he was killed on a Medellin rooftop in 1993. His funeral, over 25,000 mourners. His empire crumbled, and the Cali cartel swept in to fill the void. El Chapo, Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, came out of La Tuna, Sinaloa, born in the late 1950s. He got his start with the Guadalajara cartel back in the 80s, soaking up the craft of smuggling and violent enforcement under Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. When that cartel cracked apart, he helped launch the Sinaloa cartel and turned it into one of the biggest operations on earth. Over the next 30 years, his crew trafficked around 600,000 kilograms of cocaine, 400,000 kilograms of marijuana, and a solid stack of heroin and methamphetamine. He owned more than a quarter of the drug traffic into the United States, and the cartel raked in about $3 billion each year. That included $500 million from cocaine and up to $200 million more from meth and heroin. Even just running smuggling corridors pulled in up to $80 million a year. He ran drugs through air-conditioned tunnels under the border, carbon fiber planes, secret train cars, submarines, and even used catapults to launch product across. There was one seizure where they found 7 tons of cocaine stuffed in jalapeno cans. You can't make that up. He even paid over $1 million to build secure communication networks. But the violence was staggering. He was tied to more than 34,000 deaths and dished out bribes that reached $100 million or more. Police, military, prison guards, everybody had a price. His first arrest came in 1993, but he escaped in 2001 by hiding in a laundry cart. He got caught again in 2014, only to tunnel out in 2015. Final capture was January of 2016. Now he's locked in a Colorado Supermax, serving life plus 30 years. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Anyways, Griselda Blanco. Born in 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, Blanco clawed her way out of poverty by building one of the most violent cocaine empires the world's ever seen. She didn't ride on the coattails of the Medellin cartel either. She built her own operation from scratch, and it ran on chaos, blood, and innovation. At its peak, her network was pumping around 1,500 kilograms of cocaine into Florida every single month. That kind of volume brought in $80 million monthly, close to $1 billion each year. She used everything from human mules to speedboats, but what made her infamous were the extremes. There were smuggling ops involving dead infants, lingerie with hidden pockets, and motorcycle drive-bys. She didn't just break the rules, she rewrote them with a machete. She earned the nickname La Madrina and wasn't just suspected of dozens of murders. Some estimates put her at 250. That includes all 3 of her husbands. Her top hitman, Jorge Rivi Ayala, confessed to 3 killings and was tied to at least 36 more. By 1981, Miami's murder count hit 621, and her cartel was behind much of it. She made sure people noticed. Bombings, public stabbings, even scooters used for drive-by shootings. This was her playbook. Authorities finally got her in February of 1985 in California. She was convicted of drug trafficking and later pled guilty to multiple murders after Ayala turned on her. She served about 16 years before getting deported back to Colombia in 2004. Her net worth ranged between $500 million and $2 billion. Dozens of properties were seized, but a lot of her cash simply vanished. In September of 2012, she was killed in Medellin, shot by 2 assassins on a motorcycle, just like she used to do. Frank Lucas. Born in 1930 in LaGrange, North Carolina, Lucas made his move to Harlem by the end of the 1940s. He climbed through the street scene in the 60s, eventually working under Harlem's top boss, Bumpy Johnson. But by the end of that decade, Lucas was ready to take over, and he did it by flipping the entire drug business on its head. Instead of going through the mafia, he went straight to the source, Southeast Asia. He bought 132 kilograms of heroin at around $4,200 per kilo, and turned it around for $50,000 each back in Harlem. That kind of markup made his product, called Blue Magic, legendary on the street. It was roughly 10% pure, which was stronger than most of what was circulating at the time. He ran Harlem's heroin supply in the early 70s, knocking the mafia out of the way. He kept things professional, strict rules, no personal drug use, and family on the payroll. His 5 brothers helped run distribution out of fake businesses like laundromats and auto shops. There were claims he smuggled heroin inside coffins returning from Vietnam, but even his partner Ike Atkinson called that a complete hoax. In a 1975 raid, agents found over $500,000 in one of his properties in New Jersey. At his peak, Lucas was bribing officials up to $200,000 a week. His lifestyle, $100 suits, high-end cars, and houses across multiple states. He was sentenced to 70 years but only served about 5 before cutting a deal as an informant. He got rearrested later but was released again in 1991. Lucas died in 2019 at age 88. His life inspired a movie, but most of that was more fiction than fact. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Born in 1956 in Sinaloa, Mexico, Carrillo came from a massive family, one of 12 kids, and ended up learning the drug trade from his uncle, Ernesto Don Neto Fonseca Carrillo. That connection plugged him into the Guadalajara Cartel in the early 80s, where he sharpened his skills under Pablo Acosta and Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, managing border operations out of Ojinaga and Hermosillo. In April of 1993, he had Aguilar killed and took over the Juarez Cartel. That move gave him full control of one of Mexico's most critical trafficking routes. He earned the nickname Lord of the Skies after building a fleet of aircraft, Boeing 727s, Caravels, Cessnas, Pipers, Saberliners, all used to haul enormous loads of cocaine from Colombia into Mexico and straight into the United States. He didn't just move product, he built a whole air-based supply chain. Between 1994 and 1995, he reportedly ran 7 major flights with multi-ton shipments. He pushed his profits into Colombian money laundering networks to keep the planes running and the cartel growing. At the time of his death, his net worth hovered around $25 billion, second only to Pablo Escobar. That included real estate, a massive aircraft lineup, and deep ties to corrupt officials, including high-ranking members of the Mexican military. Carrillo was brutal, but kept it quiet. He's believed to have ordered around 400 killings to solidify power. Unlike others, he leaned on bribery and backroom deals to protect his empire. In July of 1997, he died during plastic surgery meant to change his face. Rumors still swirl that he faked his death, but the fingerprints said otherwise. The surgeons didn't live long. Both were found mutilated days later. His brother Vicente, also known as the Viceroy, took over amid chaos and infighting. Carlos later. Born in 1949 in Armenia, Colombia, later had German-Colombian roots, and a father who was openly sympathetic to Nazi ideology. That influence ran deep. Later didn't just smuggle drugs. He tried to attach fascist politics to his empire. After dropping out in New York and picking up a few criminal charges, he got locked up in Danbury, where he met George Young. The two shared a vision: skip the middlemen and control every step of the smuggling process. From around 1978 to 1982, Letter turned Norman's Cay, a tiny island in the Bahamas, into a cocaine launchpad. He poured over $4 million into it, adding a 1,000-meter runway, radar systems, guards with guns and dogs, and airstrips for non-stop trafficking. The island handled up to 3,000 kilograms of cocaine per hour at its peak. Flights dropped off cargo from Colombia and then shipped it right into Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. He co-founded the Medellin Cartel with Pablo Escobar and others, bringing in air-based smuggling on a massive scale. While his logistics were sharp, his politics were deranged. He launched a neo-Nazi party, decorated homes with Hitler memorabilia, and built a bronze statue of John Lennon wearing a Nazi helmet. His National Latin movement even won 3 local government seats. After surviving a kidnapping by M19 guerrillas, he co-founded a paramilitary group called Muerte a Secuestradores to hit back. But in 1987, the US and Colombia cracked down. betrayed by Escobar. He was arrested and became the first Medellin figure extradited to the US. He cut his life plus 135-year sentence down to 55 by testifying against Manuel Noriega. After serving over 33 years, he was released in 2020 and deported. He's now 75, facing new charges in Colombia and claiming to renounce his past. Rafael Caro Quintero. Born in 1952 in La Noria, Sinaloa, he came from a farming family and started small, with marijuana grows in the early 70s, but that didn't last long. Alongside Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, he founded the Guadalajara Cartel by the end of the decade, shifting from street-level selling to industrial-scale trafficking. He wasn't just growing weed, he was building an empire. One of his biggest operations, the Buffalo Ranch Plantation in Chihuahua, produced a crop worth around $160 million. That grow up alone triggered one of the most infamous events in drug war history. In February of 1985, U.S. agent Enrique Camarena and pilot Alfredo Zavala were kidnapped, tortured for over 30 hours, and killed. The torture happened in locations owned by Caro Quintero himself. Camarena's body was later found dumped in Michoacan with signs of brutal injuries, rebar, ice picks, the works. At his peak, Caro Quintero had a net worth between $650 million and $1 billion, fueled by marijuana, opium, and ties to Colombian suppliers. He had properties, ranches, and entire networks wrapped around his business. In April of 1985, he was arrested in Costa Rica and shipped back to Mexico. He got a 40-year sentence, but walked out in 2013 on a legal technicality after serving about 28. He immediately became a fugitive again. By 2018, the US put him on its most wanted list and dropped a $20 million reward on his head. In July of 2022, he was finally caught in Chihuahua during a Navy raid where a Black Hawk helicopter crashed, killing 14 service members. He was extradited in February of 2025 and now faces murder, drug trafficking, and racketeering charges in New York. Rick Ross, born in 1960 in Terrell, Texas. Ricky Donald Ross later made his name in South Central Los Angeles. He got the nickname Freeway from owning properties near the I-110 Harbor Freeway, but he wasn't making traffic reports. He was building a drug empire. He moved into the cocaine game by 1979 and didn't stay small time for long. From the early 80s through 1989, he ran one of the most profitable drug operations in the country. At his peak, he was moving several tons of cocaine and grossing between $1 and $2 million every day. Prosecutors estimated that he made around $900 million total, with about $300 million in profit. He once moved $3 million worth of crack in a single day, with supply chains stretching from New York to Pennsylvania to Ohio. He got his product from Oscar Danilo Blandon, a Nicaraguan who supported the Contras. That connection linked Ross indirectly to CIA, connected drug pipelines. Congressional reports later revealed that planes carrying cocaine landed in Miami and LA, and funds supported Contra fighters. While CIA investigations denied direct involvement, they did confirm agents knew about the smuggling and still blocked DEA interference. Ross wasn't subtle. His crew used police scanners, voice scramblers, and ran their numbers with industrial-grade money counters. He had UZIs, grenade launchers, and a network that reached 42 U.S. cities. By 1996, he got hit with a life sentence under the Three Strikes Law. On appeal, it dropped to 20 years, and he walked out in September of 2009. Since then, he's written a book, stepped into boxing promotion, and shifted into legal cannabis. His legacy got the spotlight in the film Kill the Messenger, and his story keeps popping up in debates about crack, politics, and government shadows. Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Born in 1948 in Sinaloa, he built his empire far from the spotlight. He started out in the Guadalajara Cartel during the 70s under Felix Gallardo, then moved into the Juarez Cartel in the early 90s. After Gallardo's arrest in 1989, Zambada helped form what would become one of the most powerful drug organizations on earth, the Sinaloa Cartel. He avoided flashy stunts and public violence, which made him harder to track. That quiet style earned him the nickname El Mayo, and it helped him evade capture for over 40 years. He didn't need rap videos or bodyguards with gold-plated rifles. He ran things like a ghost with a $3 billion budget. He used narco subs, go-fast boats, aircraft, trains, tunnels, and shell companies, smuggling cocaine, meth, heroin, fentanyl, and marijuana into major cities like Chicago, Phoenix, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Even after El Chapo was arrested in 2016, Zambada didn't disappear. He co-led the Sinaloa cartel with Chapo's sons, though his own faction, known as Los Mayos, stayed separate. His sons were all involved, Vicente, Serafin, and El Mayito Gordo, but most ended up behind bars or extradited. In July 2024, he was finally caught at a small jet port near El Paso. In a bizarre twist, he was reportedly escorted to a plane by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's own son. That arrest ended 4 decades of evasion. By September, he was arraigned in the United States on 17 felony charges, including fentanyl production and firearms violations. He's pleaded not guilty but is now in plea talks, possibly trying to avoid the death penalty. As of early 2025, he's petitioned to be sent back to Mexico, claiming jurisdiction issues. Whether that happens or not, his capture marked the fall of one of drug trafficking's most disciplined architects, Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo. Born in 1946 in Sinaloa, he got his start as a federal police agent and bodyguard to the state's governor. That role gave him access to high-level officials and laid the foundation for one of the most influential criminal careers in Mexico's history. By the late 70s, he shifted from law enforcement into drug trafficking, working under Pedro Aviles Perez before co-founding the Guadalajara Cartel with Rafael Caro Quintero and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. Between 1978 and 1980, they unified smuggling routes across Mexico's western and northern states, including Jalisco, Sinaloa, Sonora, and Chihuahua. Gallardo struck deals with Colombian suppliers by letting them keep 50% of the product instead of charging cash, which massively increased the volume of cocaine entering Mexico and flowing into the United States. By the mid-80s, his cartel was making around $5 billion per year. He didn't just control drug routes, he bought protection. His corruption network extended into the military and high-level politics, including claims of direct ties to the defense minister. This level of power earned him titles like El Padrino and El Jefe de Jefes, but in 1985, everything began to unravel. After U.S. agent Enrique Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and killed, authorities cracked down hard. Gallardo's partners were arrested, and he reorganized the cartel into a decentralized system by 1987, handing regional control to lieutenants to protect the larger operation. That plan didn't save him. He was arrested in Guadalajara on April 8, 1989, for Camarena's murder. At the time, officials seized assets including 50 homes, 200 ranches, and several businesses worth over $500 million. Though he initially continued giving orders from prison, by 1992 he was moved to a higher security facility, reducing his influence. The breakup of the Guadalajara cartel led to the rise of modern factions like Sinaloa, Juarez, Tijuana, and Sonora, setting off years of cartel violence that still hasn't stopped. Gallardo's structure, his alliances, and his corruption blueprint reshaped the drug war's entire future. Kun Sa. Born in 1934 in Burma's Shan state, he trained with Kuomintang forces after they fled China. By the late 60s, he was already in control of opium caravans and refining operations, and by the 70s, he took on the name Kun Sa, meaning Prince Prosperous. It wasn't just a nickname, it was a blueprint. From 1974 to 1994, he ran nearly half of the Golden Triangle's heroin supply into New York, growing the region's market share from 5% to 80%. By the late 80s, he owned 80% of Burma's opium output and supplied around half the heroin in the world. Burma's opium production jumped from about 550 tons to over 2,500 in just 1 decade under his control. The US Drug Enforcement Administration even praised his product, calling it 90% pure. His military wing, the Shan United Army, merged into the Mongtai Army in 1985 and grew to around 25,000 armed troops. He had fortified jungle bases with radar systems, underground tunnels, and military caravans capable of hauling 16 tons of opium at a time, escorted by hundreds of soldiers. He also taxed traffickers passing through his turf. Kun Sa wasn't hiding in the shadows. He paid Thai generals for protection, $50,000 to one for a political campaign, and negotiated safe passage for shipments. In Burma, he brokered deals with the military and eventually traded his weapons for immunity and the right to live freely in Yangon. That happened in 1996, when he surrendered around 12,000 troops and disappeared into civilian life. Despite a $2 million US bounty, he was never extradited or prosecuted. He died in 2007, running businesses in Yangon and leaving behind a state within a state built entirely on heroin. Manuel Noriega. Born in 1934 in Panama City, he came from mixed native, African, and Spanish roots and worked his way up through the Panamanian National Guard. By the early 80s, he was the head of military intelligence under General Omar Torrijos and took full control of the country's military leadership by 1983. He didn't just hold power, he monetized it. From the 60s through the 80s, he was a paid asset for the CIA, pulling in as much as $100,000 a year. He offered intelligence on Cuba, coordinated arms for Contra rebels, and opened Panama's doors to cocaine trafficking. In 1982, he let Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel move cocaine through Tocumen Airport, charging about $1,000 per kilogram. That deal made Panama a key node in the global drug pipeline. By 1988, U.S. prosecutors hit him with indictments for trafficking, laundering, and racketeering. His reaction? He sanctioned over 600 harassment incidents against U.S. military and civilians in Panama, everything from roadblocks to assaults. That didn't go unanswered. In December of 1989, the U.S. launched Operation Just Cause after Noriega annulled the country's elections, and a U.S. Marine was killed at a roadblock. Navy SEALs secured his private airstrip, blocked his Learjet, and surrounded the Vatican embassy where he hid. They blasted rock music outside until he finally surrendered on January 3rd, 1990. He was flown to Miami and convicted in 1992 on 8 counts, including trafficking and laundering. Originally sentenced to 40 years, he served 17 before being extradited to France, where he was sentenced again in 2010 for laundering $3 million. In 2011, he was sent back to Panama for human rights violations and murder charges. Diagnosed with a brain tumor in early 2017, he died in surgery that May, ending a career that merged Cold War intelligence, drug money, and brutal power. George Young, born in 1942 in Boston and raised in Weymouth, Massachusetts, Young got his start smuggling marijuana in the late 60s. He used small planes and even recruited off-duty flight attendants to help ferry pot from California to the East Coast. Before long, he was charging $10,000 per kilogram and loading up to 300 kilograms per flight, pulling in anywhere from $3 to $5 million a day during his peak years. Everything changed in 1974 when he was busted in Chicago with over 600 pounds of marijuana. While locked up in Danbury Prison, he met Carlos Leder, and that meeting would reshape the U.S. drug trade. After their release, they started air smuggling Colombian cocaine into the United States. Young helped build the transport backbone that allowed the Medellin cartel to flood the U.S. market with cocaine by the late 70s. He eventually built his own direct pipeline to Pablo Escobar, at one point helping move over 80% of all cocaine entering the country. Flights ran through the Bahamas and Colombia into stateside airstrips, with revenue soaring to as much as $30 million a month. His personal net worth crossed $100 million. In 1994, he was caught again, this time in Kansas with over 1,700 pounds of cocaine. He pleaded guilty and got 60 years, but testified against Leder and had his sentence reduced. After serving about 20 years, he was released in 2014, then briefly rearrested in 2016 for violating parole. He got out again in 2017. Young died on May 5th, 2021 at age 78 from liver and kidney failure. His life was immortalized in the film Blow, where Johnny Depp played him. Young praised the film's honesty, especially its focus on regret and family estrangement. Zhenli Ye Gan, born in 1963 in Shanghai, he became a naturalized Mexican citizen in 2002 and launched several pharmaceutical companies, most notably Unamed Pharmchem Mexico. From 2002 to 2005, his business legally imported massive quantities of pseudoephedrine and ephedrine, common in cold medicine, but also the main ingredients for making methamphetamine. Audits didn't initially raise red flags, and out of nearly 300 shipments, only 4 were flagged during the last stretch of his operation. That all changed on March 15, 2007, when Mexican authorities raided his luxury mansion in Mexico City. Inside, they found over $205 million in US currency stacked in $100 bills. There were also pesos, euros, Hong Kong dollars, gold coins, jewelry, and guns. The DEA called it the biggest cash seizure in drug enforcement history tied to meth chemicals. Yegan didn't stay quiet. He claimed the cash was political, extorted by officials from then-President Calderon's administration for campaign purposes. Not cartel money, he insisted, just coerced donations. But at the same time, Mexican and US agents launched a joint investigation, suspecting he'd been supplying chemicals to meth labs across the region. He was arrested that July in Maryland while eating at a restaurant. The US charged him with conspiracy to help manufacture meth using his imported precursors. But that case crumbled. Witnesses backed out, evidence got lost, and test results were inconclusive. By August 2009, the charges were dropped. Permanently. Still, he wasn't free. He remained in custody until October 2016 when he was extradited to Mexico. There, he faces serious charges: organized crime, drug trafficking, illegal weapons possession, and money laundering. His bust led to tighter control on pseudoephedrine sales across Mexico and redefined how chemical-based trafficking is policed. Rayful Edmond III. Born in 1964 in Washington, D.C., Edmond was already helping bag drugs by age 9. His parents sold diet pills, but by his early 20s, He was importing cocaine by the ton and turning DC into one of the deadliest cities in America. He transitioned from marijuana into cocaine, then crack, changing the entire game. At his peak, he was moving between 1,000 and 2,000 kilograms of cocaine every week, sourcing directly from Colombian suppliers tied to the Trujillo Blanco network. Prosecutors called him the Babe Ruth of crack, and not for nothing. He was pulling in around $2 million worth of product weekly, employing 150 people, and distributing to over 40 US cities. He didn't just move weight, he fueled a murder wave. DC homicides nearly doubled by 1989, peaking at over 430. His crew was tied to about 30 killings, and he allegedly ordered hits that cost up to $250,000. Uzis weren't optional, they were standard gear. He wore custom suits rolled through DC in Jaguars with gold trim and sat courtside at Georgetown Hoyas games. But he also handed out $100 bills and coached kids basketball, walking the line between menace and folk hero. In April 1989, he and 28 others were arrested in a major federal sting. He got 2 life sentences plus 30 years for running a continuing criminal enterprise, even after investigators caught him coordinating drug deals from prison using coded calls. In the 90s, he flipped. He gave up intel that brought down more than 100 dealers and helped with multiple homicide cases. His sentence was eventually cut to 20 years, and he moved to federal reentry in 2024. He died that December in Florida at age 60 from hypertensive cardiovascular disease. Jose Figueroa Agosto. Born in 1964 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, he rose from local drug runner to the man who controlled nearly 90% of the cocaine market in Puerto Rico. He went by names like Junior Capsula and Angel Rosa, but most people just called him the Pablo Escobar of the Caribbean. He didn't just push product, he built a whole trafficking ecosystem. Starting in Puerto Rico, he expanded into the Dominican Republic, running cocaine by luxury motor vessels. From 2005 through 2010, his network trafficked over 10 metric tons of cocaine and heroin. That supply hit Puerto Rico, mainland cities in the US, and even made it across the Atlantic to Europe. His operation was slick. It used shell companies, fake owners, and nominee bank accounts to hide money laundering, while the actual shipping was handled through fleets that looked more like they belonged in yacht clubs than cartel files. At its peak, his cartel had tentacles in Colombia, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, and across international waters, enough to get him hit with charges under the Continuing Criminal Enterprise statute. But it wasn't all yachts and straw accounts. In 1993, he was sentenced to 209 years for murder in Puerto Rico. Then, in 1999, he walked out using forged release documents and vanished. He stayed on the run for over 10 years before getting arrested on July 17, 2010 in Puerto Rico. In 2012, he pleaded guilty to U.S. trafficking charges and got sentenced to 30 years in 2017. Somehow, he served only 10 years before being released in 2020. He flaunted his wealth with mansions, exotic pets, and even starred in a homemade sex tape. He taunted law enforcement over the radio, bragging about bribes and putting prices on police heads. He didn't just run drugs, he ran the island's underworld. Congrats on making it to the end. If you like this video, please show your support by hitting the like and subscribe button.